Bien, parece que estaba en mute, así que no se escuchaba nada, pero bueno, voy a eh, nuevamente compartirles. La idea de la comunidad es poder, entre todos los profesionales que están dedicados a la prevención de fraude, poder compartir experiencias, ideas, problemáticas, y también poder compartir con expertos a nivel mundial, como es el caso que tenemos hoy con Avi Turman, de hacia dónde va este mundo de la prevención de fraude, hacia dónde va la tecnología, y entonces tener un espacio en donde todos podamos contribuir a proteger nuestra economía digital. Mientras esperamos, por favor, hagan escaneo del QR y vamos a comenzar en breve. Bueno, a los que se van sumando, les doy la bienvenida a esta masterclass sobre el futuro de las tecnologías de prevención de fraude y de autenticación con que estamos lanzando nuestra comunidad de prevención de fraude y lavado de dinero. Como les dije anteriormente, tenemos el honor de contar hoy día con Avi Turman, que es uno de los pioneros en desarrollar tecnologías en biometría de comportamiento. Él fundó BioCatch, es uno de los fundadores de BioCatch, y hoy día, a través de otra de sus compañías, también está desarrollando y está aportando a la comunidad mundial con tecnologías muy disruptivas en la prevención de fraude. Antes de comenzar, voy a explicarles cómo activar la traducción simultánea. La idea es que tengamos un closed caption y entonces puedan ustedes estar viendo la traducción simultánea mientras habla Avi. Para hacer esto, tiene que irse a la parte izquierda de su pantalla, o sea, cliquear sobre CC, Closed Caption, abajo, seleccionar a la parte izquierda el idioma inglés, es decir, que la persona que va a estar hablando en inglés, y al lado derecho hay una ruedita donde se hace la configuración, van a la parte de idioma, ¿cierto? Closed Caption, y lo ponen en español, de tal forma de que el subtítulo va a aparecer en español. Es posible que cuando estemos hablando en español se desconfigure y haya que volver a configurar bajo este mismo procedimiento. Recuerden, hacia la izquierda en inglés y en la ruedita de configuración hay que hacerlo en español. Bien, creo que ya podemos partir. Vamos a comenzar con esta presentación. Nuevamente, Avi Turman, experto mundial en prevención de fraude digital, biometría de comportamiento, nos va a hablar de su visión respecto a las nuevas tecnologías eh, o hacia dónde va el mundo en el mundo de la prevención de fraude y autenticación. Bueno, dejo ahora con Avi para que nos cuente cuál es su visión. Avi, you can present your vision about the future in the fraud prevention and authentication. You can turn on your camera and present. Thank you.
Can you see my deck?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Edu. We appreciate the opportunity to present here. Let's start. Everyone, my name is Avi Turgeman. Some of you might know me from BioCatch, in which I was the founder and CTO for many years. Nowadays, I'm the CEO of a company called Ironvest. Even before that, I had a company in the payment space called Tepingo, which I sold to Grubhub in the US, another company in the laser space. And before all of that, I was in the intelligence unit A200. It's an Israeli intelligence unit. And this is actually where I want to start my conversation, because there is where I headed the Innovation Cyber Lab, where we did lots of crazy stuff on the opposite side of what I'm doing today. So it was an experience that completely changed the way I'm seeing the world, the way I'm dealing with the virtual space and the digital space. And in the presentation today, I would like to share this with you and give you the perspective of someone that almost was on the other side of the fraud and hacking, and then use that and leverage that and see how we can basically think about a new, better future for both the fraud and authentication. So the first thing I would like to do is first map the kind of attack surfaces, mainly in order to see what we are going to speak and what is excluded in this conversation. So the first attack surface with it's called sometimes the social engineering. That's kind of the human element. This is where people are being fooled to do stupid stuff. The vulnerability there is the human on one end, but on the other end, this is where we actually lack technology. It happens outside of the digital platform. So this is something which will be out of scope for this discussion. We can have a full presentation and discussion and just on this social engineering aspect. But for the sake of this discussion, that will be left out. And I will focus mostly on vulnerabilities around our technologies, around the digital channel, anything we're doing online, especially when it's related to money, like banks, payment, etc. So the two other attack surfaces are, one is the application logic. And this is where most of the attacks that going on in banks are happening. It's mostly exploiting the logic and the design of the applications of our banking system, our financial institutions, the malwares, the Trojans on one end, the credential stuffing on the other, all the different phishing also included there. Even if it's social engineers in order to get the OTP, eventually it's a third party that get into the account, meets the digital platform. Again, also that will be included, etc. The other surface, other attack surface is actually going a bit deeper. This is the hardware and system layer. So that, in a way, also include the application exploitation. But in this case, it's actually exploiting the vulnerabilities of the code itself. It's in the binary level, in the bits and bytes of the application. And in this case, you sometimes maybe hear about a device that is being hacked, or an operating system, or the Microsoft or Google that were being hacked. That goes usually deeper, really into the bits and bytes and manipulating those kind of inner level. And in my days in A200 in the intelligence, eventually I become very well versed with this bit and byte piece, and whenever I'm seeing internet, that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing zeros and ones, right? For me, it's all about when you go into a website, you maybe see a website, I see the zero and ones flowing into the computer. And when a user clicking his keyboard, I see the zero and ones going out. And this is how hackers are being trained, right? Like to go into the deeper level of the one and zeros and basically find there everything that they want. So I'm sure some of you saw the Matrix, the movie, the Matrix, where everything there, basically all the physical world is actually one and zeros. That's really the reality in our internet, in the virtual world of the internet. It's all one and zeros. Now, normal people mistakenly think about this virtual world as if it was like buildings in the physical world, right? I mean, even the terms like website, building a website, building sites, etc. It's always kind of this notion of kind of physical structures that we are building online. Now, how you protect physical buildings? You protect it with usually guards at the gate, right? Locks on the doors. And in a way, this is also what we're doing on the virtual. One other thing we're doing with the physical buildings that we protect, we always say, yeah, maybe a rubber will get through the window. So then we have all those signals that sometimes you see in movies, but they are very real, of us trying to catch this person that sneak into the building. Again, we have the same thing in our banks, but digital banks are not physical buildings, obviously, and as I mentioned, they are just bits and bytes, just one and zero. And so the question to you guys is, why do we protect them as if they are physical building, right? If you're thinking about this today, we have the gate to any website, which is the login, right? This is basically the authentication piece, and that's very much equivalent to this guard in the gate to a building. And later on, we have all those signals that trying to catch anyone who somehow slipped through the window into the website. Even the organizations themselves structure similarly, right? We have the authentication team, right, that in charge for everyone to identify everyone that wants to enter the website. And we have the fraud teams that, assuming the authentication didn't work and someone slipped in, and now they want to detect it and to to find this guy that somehow got into your bank account. So de facto, the way today we protect our digital asset is almost equivalent one-to-one with how we're protecting a physical building, which is absurd, right? It's completely absurd because obviously, as I mentioned, these are just one and zeros, just one and zeros. There are no gates, there are not walls, there are nothing like that. And the fact that we protect it as if they are like that is already the biggest gap in our security system. And this is what I'll try to explain here. Now, it's not just that, it's just this concept of authentication at the beginning, and then fraud signals that detect after the authentication also create a mess everywhere, both for the user and for the bank itself, right? And this is how it looks like from the bank perspective and the customer perspective, right? I mean, banks today are using different signals. One of them, I invented, which is the behavioral from BioCatch. So you have the behavioral signals, you have geolocation signals, you have device signals, link analysis, transactions, network, etc., etc. All those signals are statisticals, meaning they have errors, false positive, false negative, meanings you need to mitigate it with different step-ups, MFA, authentication in addition to what happened in the login, all the OTP stuff, KBA, etc. So at the end of the day, you're finding yourself with a huge stack of signals. And the user on the other end just keep proving who they are instead of doing what they do. And that's lead to one of the biggest paradox, in my opinion, that happens today in authentication and fraud in banking, right? Banks altogether spend billions, right, on detecting fraud. But on the bottom line, they still have tons of fraud, and the user experience is very much interrupted, especially when they want to do something which is sensitive. And in fact, there was a very interesting article in the Wall Street Journal with actually calculated how much time we spend from our life on just proving who we are in the internet instead of actually do what we want to do. And it came to like billions of years altogether. So billions of human years is being spent just on proving who we are online. And that tells you about the amount of interruption that, especially, by the way, financial services create to our lifestyle. From the buyer perspective, it's the same thing, right? I mean, someone sits in a bank, needs to cover all the attack surfaces that I mentioned. And obviously, there are different use cases, different threats. There are also emerging threats that keep coming up. You need to sit with a list, basically, of all the vendors. Each one, what are they covering? And the job at the end of the day is to find this combination of vendors that overlap as much as possible out of the problem. So sometimes you find yourself spending money on 6, 7, 8 vendors, and it's not just the signals; it's also the ones that doing the risk engines and the case management and the policy management and the orchestration to mitigate to the MFA. So it's also the MFA, the soft token, etc. So endless amount of signals and operation around it, and all the overhead, tons of money, tons of work. And what I will try to show you now is that there is another way. And so what I'm seeing as the root of the problem is what I started with, the notion that a digital website is similar to a physical building. Basically, in the every digital platform today, every digital application or service, you have these two things very much separate: the authentication of the user, and then the action that the user is doing. Right? The action could be sending money, but can also be like writing an email. It doesn't matter if it's a bank or an email service. At the end of the day, all of them are acting the same. We have separate session to authenticate the user and separate session to do the action. That's basically enable all the fraud attacks today, because fraud attacks today are either compromising the authentication piece, right, with the credential stuffing, with the OTP or SIM swap, if it's like the passwordless stuff, or any type of of kind of biometric bypassing as well. Even if you will use the biometric in the login, doesn't matter. There is a way to bypass it because the session coming after, and session can be hijacked, and action can be manipulated. So all the attacks basically based on this principle of separation, the principle of separation between authentication and the action. And when you basically have those attacks coming, you need to detect them. And detection is almost by definition a statistical method, right? So it always will have this false positive and false negative. And that's what eventually lead to the multi-layer approach, right? You cannot rely on a single detection signal. You need a bunch of them. So you have a multi-layer of signals, and that's obviously lead to the user friction that I mentioned. So overall, what originate all this mess is this principle of separation: action, authentication, and then the action. And I want you to think now, in order to start kind of thinking of how we getting rid of this principle of separation. Think about the physical world, the real world that we know. Two people are meeting together, right? Today, how human do that? Leave aside the digital. Let's think about us. When you're meeting someone in the real world, how you validating their identity, how you validating the request and their action. So we are having this the fusion principle, it's called, right? You basically fusioning together tons of different identification signals and the action at the same time, right? So someone coming asking, let's say, a real banker, a human banker, to make a transfer. If those people know each other from before, immediately he authenticate him like in his brain. At the same time, that this person asked to do something. So in reality, in the physical reality, we're doing both the authentication of the people we're interacting with and the action of them at the same time, right? There is no separation. We're not first, especially I'm talking about people that know each other, right? If I know someone, I'm not first kind of validating their identity and then ask him, okay, what do you want to do? So in real time, we're doing authentication and action together. But now there is the translator case that I want to present. What if you've seen here two people meeting, let's say the banker? What if one of them is actually a translator? And these two people, they don't speak in the same language, right? So you need the middleman to translate, let's say, the client to the banker. So the banker know the client. You know that this is the client that usually is doing business with. But he cannot directly speak with him because they speak different language. And they have the translator. That's what happened actually in the digital world. Because the question will be, how do we know that the translator is actually really translating everything this client says, right? How we can trust the translator. And the translator in the digital space is the whole digital platform stack between authentication and action, okay? So basically the translator is the one that introduced the opportunity for a compromise, because the translator himself can be compromised in the real world. In the digital, this is the device, this is the application logic, etc. We always have a translator. And the question should be, in order to solve our problem, is how to eliminate the translator, how to eliminate this separation. So obviously, the first step should be fusion of identity and action. Okay, if we eliminate the principle of separation and we create a situation when the authentication and the actions happen together, none of the current account takeover methods, whether they are like third party or first party, can happen, right? And so by merging these two, the authentication, the identity piece, with the action, we're actually shifting from detection to prevention. And that what will help us basically to get rid of the statistical signals that we have on the detection side, right? If there is no separation between action and between authentication and action, you don't need detection signals, meaning you basically have a simple yes/no decision, which is just whether the action and authentication validates yes or no. And that's basically the big story, because if you will be able to do that, and by the way, since I left the intelligence, that was my goal to do that, and I tried to do that in BioCatch to an extent. Now I took it to the next level with Iron Vest, but that was my kind of life goal, to get rid of this principle of separation, this action and authentication as two different sessions. Because as much as we will be able to do that, we will eliminate fraud altogether. We will reduce operational costs associated with fraud dramatically. And more importantly, we will eliminate user interruption altogether. Now, this is how it looks like de facto. I mean, today, if you're looking on a session flow of a user, they starting with a login, then there is tons of out of band when the user needs to go for the second factors. And then if there is a fraud signal, indicating maybe a new device or different geolocation, then another step up will happen. So the user experience is very much interrupted as much as we are doing things which, are out of the ordinary or very risky, right? While if we'll be able to merge this action and authentication together, we can truly create an uninterrupted and seamless end-to-end user experience with everything seamlessly happening while the user doing the action, right? Because these are two fusions. So the user is just focused on the action. And by focusing on the action, we also doing the authentication. Now, there are different ways to do that. I will not get into how to do that. Just, give foods for thoughts on like what should be the goal of anyone, I believe, that deal with the fraud and authentication. Basically merge this. Instead of keeping authentication and fraud detection separate, merge authentication and action and do the fraud and authentication in a fusion manner. Now, whenever I'm talking about kind of zero fraud and Boolean decision, I mean, it sounds too good to be true. I mean, it's not possible. Everything has false positive, everything has false negative. You need to remember that this is only if you're dealing in an environment which you need detection. But again, I encourage to go back to the physical world, to the real world, and ask yourself, if like someone that it could be your children, your friends, whatever, how many times someone will, you can imagine that someone will come to you and tell you, like a complete stranger will come to you and tell you that they are your son and they need money, you will give them money. Is that even possible? You can imagine something like that happening in the real world? any false positive or false negative that we will mistakenly give someone money, complete stranger, because he told us that he is your son. This is actually what happened on the digital all the time. In reality, it never happened. So if it can happen in the reality, we need to understand why it cannot happen in reality, and then how we can implement the same kind of fusion mechanism also on the online. And with that, I think I finished my pitch. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Abby. Vamos a pasar, si tienen preguntas que hacer, por favor, pueden hacerla ahí en el chat. Si hay alguien que tiene alguna pregunta. Abby, I asking if somebody has a question, but I have a question regarding today today in the world we have a lot of conversation, a lot of initiative regarding the artificial intelligence, and you said that we need to think in the real world in order to get a solution for the digital world, but the artificial intelligence stimulate a real world. My question is, what are you thinking to prevent this new technology in your vision? How we need to do?
Yeah. So yeah, there are different answers about that. I will start with the more simple one. Actually, today, in order to do a deepfake, what's called like a deepfake, basically impersonating like a real person, in the context of authentication, you need to use a virtual camera. You can't do that with a physical camera. Okay, so deepfake, as an example, will not work on Face ID, like on Apple Face ID. They don't have any problem of deepfake, right? So as deepfake cannot work with a physical camera. With a physical camera means you showing, a video on the screen, it become a liveness problem, not a deepfake problem. Deepfake can only work on the authentication work through a video injection, and that require a virtual camera. Virtual camera on itself, it's very easy to detect, right? So it becomes like a question of virtual camera versus physical camera. So as long as you build your solution with a physical camera, while detecting virtual camera, which is I don't want to get how to do that, but it's basically a technical issue. It's not even like a machine learning or AI issue, right? A virtual versus a physical camera. Deepfake is very good with me trying to simulate you doing something and post it in YouTube, right? I can cook a video of you doing something that you never did and publish it online. But when you're dealing with kind of real-time authentication, it's not about publishing something on YouTube. It's about injecting it into the camera. So that's kind of a technical thing on its own, which is easy to do. And that's why you don't see really, I mean, as long as the solution provider aware of that, you don't really see deepfake on authentication stuff. Okay, but even if you're going to this let's say imaginary situation in which you will do a deepfake, inject it into the camera, and let's say we will not be able to detect that it's virtual versus physical, then now it's a matter of data, right? And eventually they are not the same. Even the AI itself, no, it's not the same, right? And there are different reasons why it's not the same. There are many artifacts, right, that are almost like by definition integrated into the deepfake. And as much as you have more data, the strength is with the detection versus the opposite side. Now, in the use case of login, that's a problem, because in the login, we restricted ourselves for the time in which we collect the video, because we want, to authenticate as quick as possible and let the user get in. In the fusion of authentication and action, you almost don't have limit on the collection times. And as much as you have more and more collection on the biometric side, it becomes more and more and more accurate. I'm talking about the spoofing detection, the deepfake detection, etc. So the use case on its own in the fusion situation make the biometric much, like in magnitude of orders, more accurate, both on the matching side, but also on the spoofing side. Okay, and that's kind of for a future which is not here now, right? Because again, deepfake injection will not really work because of the difference between virtual camera and physical camera, and not because of the video itself. I hope it was clear, Edu.
Yeah, thank you, Avi. I have another question here. If you can explain again how we can eliminate the translator. You say that we need a translator between authentication and action. If you can explain again how
Yeah,
we can eliminate this
yeah,
translation.
yeah. So that goes kind of to a specific solutions that built on this concept. So as you know, I built today 2 companies in this field. One is BioCatch, that was 10 years ago, and now IronVest. With both of them, I tried to eliminate the translator. So think about BioCatch. What BioCatch is doing, they are authenticating you based on the way you type, right? Basically based on your action, right? So you're taking the action of the user and you're trying to assess whether this is the user or not. So there is nothing interfering in the middle. You're seeing the behavior of the user, right? And now, based on the behavior that you received, without this behavior, you will not be able to do anything, right? You're trying to authenticate. So this is one way to try and kind of eliminate the translator. The problem with what we did in BioCatch is that we kind of invented a new way to biometrically identify people, but it wasn't accurate, right? It became another statistical score at the end of the day, right? And so we eliminate the translator, but we didn't do it with enough accuracy, right? In order to get rid of other signals, if you like. With IronVest, we took a different approach, and now we're leveraging in IronVest, sorry, it's the Face ID, but into the act at the time of the action through the screen. So this is kind of complicated to explain on one leg, but in general, we're merging the face biometric with the action of the user through the screen sharing. So we're doing something similar to what we're doing in Zoom or right now in Google Meet, but by merging the face biometric, which is accurate, very accurate, with the action through the screen. And when we do that, we kind of bypassing the whole digital platform through the screen card of the computer, right? And seeing everything going on. So that's kind of become a bit more technical to explain it, but it just gives you kind of ideas on how to think of the translator elimination.
Ok, muchas gracias, Avi. Vamos a ver si tenemos alguna otra pregunta. Estoy entendiendo la pregunta. The question is, if you have some results regarding how this fusion between authentication and the fusion with fraud and the authentication, if you have some results and number, how effective is this new approach?
Yeah. So I can, yeah, one thing that I did in with this new approach, which I didn't do with BioCatch, is to go on and actually build my own bank, if you like, right? So I have kind of my own consumer-facing fintech that doing payments and banking services. It's work mostly on the US and a little bit globally, and we use that as our sandbox to test all of that at the beginning, right? But what we did there, we implement this fusion only to half of the population. So we have half of the population doing kind of the normal, what we call the principle of separation, authentication, and then doing the action. And half of the population, we put this fusion. Now, because we're doing payments with credit card, with money movement, etc., we also have fraud, but only on the population with that have this separation between authentication and fraud. For the population with the authentication and action fusion, we have zero fraud and zero false negative, meaning zero false positive, zero false negative. And so for us, it worked amazing. And only when I got these metrics of results showing that this is I'm putting my mouth where the money is, right? When it's working on my consumer, then I started going to to banks, etc., and tell them what I did to my user, we can also do for yours. And then we went through some pilots, and results are very much similar.
Okay, thank you, Avi. Bueno, no tenemos más preguntas, así que con esto damos por terminada esta sesión. Avi, thank you very much for share your vision, for share your knowledge. Probably for the future, we will have another session with you, I hope. Appreciate your collaboration with the community. And, bueno, agradecer a todos los que se conectaron hoy a la sesión. Vamos a dejar grabada la sesión en la comunidad. Así que voy a proyectar nuevamente el QR para que a quienes no se han inscrito todavía. Así que, bueno, muchas gracias. Hasta una próxima oportunidad. Nuevamente, les hago hincapié en que la idea de esta comunidad es poder compartir experiencias, conocimientos e incluso problemas entre todos los que estamos dedicados a la prevención de fraude y de lavado de dinero. Bueno, muchas gracias nuevamente, Avi. Hasta una próxima oportunidad. También les cuento que ya pronto tendremos otra masterclass con otro increíble gurú a nivel mundial. Muchas gracias, Avi. Thank you very much, Avi.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right.
Okay. Adiós. Que estén muy bien.